I want to welcome you to the IACLEA 2023 Global Campus Safety Series on mental health. I am Paul Sell, Executive Director of IACLEA, and I am honored today to introduce our President, John Ojiskova, for opening remarks. President Ojiskova is the Chief and AVP at Biola University, located in Southern California. Through his compassion for others, dedication to service, and global vision, Chief O, or GQ as he likes to be called, truly exemplifies all that a leader should be and is bringing IACLEA to new heights. It's my honor again to welcome President Ojiskova.
Thank you, Executive Director Paul Sell, for that introduction, and hello everyone, for joining us, here today. On behalf of the IACLEA Board of Directors and our staff, I want to thank everyone for joining us, for this important, webinar. A few years ago, I received a phone call from the Los Angeles County Sheriff Department informing me that my nephew, Moses, whom I serve as a parent to, was found deceased inside his vehicle just a couple of miles away from our campus. He took his own life. Moses had just graduated from this very same university. He had his life all planned out, for him, and things were looking really good. But things were looking really good, from the outside only. From the inside, he suffered significant mental health issues. Here I was then, I had spent 2 decades working with campus partners to prevent and support students going through mental health challenges. But I never saw my own coming. From continents to countries to communities, the subject of mental health issues has no boundaries at all. And these issues rapidly impacting the lives of our students every single day. We must continue to seek ways to learn from one another. We must continue to seek ways to do better. And that is why this webinar today is extremely important. And I want to thank all our experts for their contributions in advance. At this point, I would like to turn things over to our moderator, Rob Kilfoyle. Rob is IACLEA's Regional Director for Canada. Rob?
Thank you, President Ojiskova. Welcome everyone to IACLEA's Global Campus Safety Series. Today is the first of a multi-part series where we will examine the topic of mental health from a global perspective. As John mentioned, I am IACLEA's Canadian Regional Director, and on behalf of IACLEA, I'd like to welcome you to this important webinar today. We will be joined shortly by our panel of experts, but first I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. As this is a webinar about mental health, we encourage you to routinely check in with yourself. Only when we acknowledge that we ourselves sometimes need help can we truly help others. And I know that's why we're all here today. To participate in today's panel, we ask you to use the Q&A function or chat function to ask a question at any time during the presentation. We will save time at the end to ask our panelists as many of your questions as we can in the time we have together. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted in IACLEA's members-only community connections, as well as in other IACLEA communication streams. And now let's meet our panelists, and I will ask them individually to introduce themselves with a short introduction. We'll first start off with Dr. Madiba from the University of Pretoria, South Africa.
Thank you so much, Rob, for the opportunity, and good afternoon to all in the room. I am Madidi Madiba. I am currently Director of Student Affairs at the University of Pretoria. I wonder if you want more, but yes, I am Director of Student Affairs.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Madiba. We'll now move on to Assistant Director Jake McIsaac from Dalhousie University in my home country of Canada. Welcome, Jake.
Good morning, folks. I'm Jake McIsaac, Assistant Director of Campus Security at Dalhousie University on the east coast of Canada. It's a nice day. It's no snow yet, so we're happy when there's no snow. So glad to be here.
Great. Thank you, Jake. I'll turn it over now to Dr. Pennington from NASPA.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Pennington. I was the Vice President for Student Affairs most recently at Montclair State University, and I'm representing NASPA Student Affairs Administrators in Higher Education.
Thank you, Dr. Pennington. We'll now move on to Richard Yates from the University of Sheffield, United Kingdom.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard. I'm actually calling from the afternoon here in the UK, and it is snowing outside, so that may make me feel all at home. And I'm really pleased to be invited onto this webinar.
Thank you, Richard. And last but not least, I'm pleased to introduce Chief Kristen Roman from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Kristen Roman, currently serving as the Chief of Police and Associate Vice Chancellor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We are a large public research institution here in the state of Wisconsin. We have around 40,000 or so combined undergrad and grad students, and around 20,000 employees, faculty, and other staff. So pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. And I'm truly grateful that we have such a amazing international group of panelists. And so with all of that, we'll just jump right into some questions and answers. And I will ask you individual questions, and you can take a few minutes to answer. And then if anybody else wants to sort of jump in, please feel free. So my first question is going to be directed to you, Richard. When it comes to the mental health response on campus, currently, what is your largest challenge?
Okay. A number of years ago here in Sheffield, and just to give a rough indication, we're operating with approximately 30,000 students and 9,000 staff. We saw quite a significant increase in students in mental health crisis, and a lot of that first response was part of the duties of my team. What we undertook then was an analysis, an incident pattern analysis, and colleagues will be very familiar with that with regards to crime patterns and things. And we did the same thing from a welfare perspective, because a lot of the support services in and around the university were Monday to Friday, core hours 8 a.m. through till 5 p.m. And what the analysis showed us is that where students, and it is mainly students, falling into crisis where it can be an emergency, the vast majority of times were out of normal working hours, either within a residential setting, and we have halls of residence, or it was in some of our 24/7 research buildings. So what we had to look at then is to make sure that things were resourced accordingly and in line with our university need. So our biggest challenge has always been and continues to be that clinical support in within the university's time frame. We all deliver learning and teaching, but we can operate quite differently. And for our university, it was one to say, if we are going to operate services 24/7 and encourage our students to partake with that, we need an element of support in place. And so that was our biggest challenge, and we are still working through that. But I did manage to get a whole host of resources to enable us to support the wider student community better. For instance, all my team are mental health first aiders, and they're also suicide intervention skill trained. So that was a core training element that came out of that assessment.
Fantastic. Thanks, Richard. Does anyone else have a bit of information they'd like to offer to that question? Okay. Not seeing any. Thanks, Richard, for that response. We'll move on to question 2, and I'll direct this to Dr. Madiba. Can you tell us a little bit how mental health crises are handled on your campus?
Thank you. What drives our response to mental crisis, which can also be read as mental health emergencies on campus, is containment. So we have basically 2 main strategies, and then we have extras that surround the 2 main strategies of containment. One, we have an emergency telephone line to call, which our students made it very clear in particular that it should be toll-free. So you are able to call, and that number, when you call, it goes to our Department of Security, security services, and then they take the call, assess what's happening. The next action is then to call an ambulance, which will come to the scene depending on whatever case is presenting. And if it's really a mental health crisis, somebody presenting with a case which needs immediate attention, an ambulance will be activated and the person will be taken to a private hospital where they'll be contained. We have this agreement, and the first night of containment is actually free of charge. So it helps our students. There are no issues in terms of class or whatever, in terms of how this containment strategy rolls out. And this private provider is our partner. We are able to service specifically students, but also staff in that manner. We also have another partner who provides a 24/7 telephone services. Any time of the day or of the night, if you need immediate attention as far as mental health is concerned, you can dial this care line. It is also toll-free. There are no charges associated with it. And the person over the line will then engage you and then help to determine the next steps. If it is a situation where they can contain you for the larger part, especially if it's evening, then that is okay. They will refer your case to mental health practitioners the following day. But if it is a situation that needs immediate attention, they will then also activate our security services to be able to organize resources to get to the place where you are. So those are our main, the 2 main strategies, especially where emergency containment is needed. We are now rolling in a 3rd strategy in terms of first responders, where we are rolling out training throughout the university in all of our campuses to train as many as we can in terms of staff and students to be first responders. For sure, you are aware that in many other organizations and institutions, we do have first aid responders. So we are doing now the same, we're using the same concept for mental health. But we also have a peer support training that we offer to students where they are able to support their peers in case they need immediate attention. Let me stop there for now.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a very robust response to mental health crisis on campus. Would any of the other panelists like to chime in on this? And I see Dr. Pennington, you have a response?
Yeah, I would just like to comment and support Dr. Madiba's comments, particularly about the peer support. One of the things that we know is that students listen to other students. more so than they would listen to us a lot of times. And so the training and support of student peers as advocates for these issues has really been critical in a lot of cases, with encouraging students who need mental health support to go out and seek it before it becomes a crisis, before it becomes an emergency. So all of those efforts to do peer training is really a help on many, many campuses.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I know at our campus, we also have many volunteers that volunteer in sort of peer support for in a number of issues, and that has been quite effective. I agree wholeheartedly. Okay, anyone else want to try that question, or I'll move on to the next? All right. Again, thank you, Dr. Madiba and Dr. Pennington, for your responses. Well, now I'll direct this question to my fellow Canadian, Jake. Do you have a group that meets regularly to discuss mental health concerns, and not necessarily crises, but things that arise for students, faculty, and staff? And if so, how often do you meet, and who is part of that group?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rob. And just wanted to build on something my colleagues just referenced about making mental health response more accessible. One thing that we did a number of years ago was to develop an app. We call it DAL Safe. We partnered with App Armor to do that. And we built into that 3 things for our student constituents to do, to recognize the signs of when their friends were in crisis, because that's to that point, they were telling us everyone knew after, but they didn't know what to do. So recognizing the signs of mental health crisis, responding, what to say, what not to say. So in that moment, as they were caring for folks. And the third one was how to get help, how to refer. When is it stripped past your being a good friend to where you need to reach out for help? And so what they told us built into that app was a chat with dispatch feature, so that they could actually, any student could just text dispatch, because they told us that only their parents actually use the phone. So it made actually reaching out for help far more accessible. It started to spike when students were saying, we think we need help. And so many, many calls for service started to be generated. So I won't dig into that too much. That those came to our team. We were the primary responders, because like colleagues also said, we're here 24/7. Our team that you talked about, Rob, is what do you do next? And so for what does Monday morning look like after a busy weekend? And so we developed a group. It's just a behavior intervention team, but it's a cross-discipline, multi-stakeholder team that meets weekly. And so what I bring to that team is those initial response stories. Could be body-worn camera footage. It could be the incident reports. It's the view from what it was like on Saturday night, potentially, to this team that meets every Tuesday morning. That is a team that is a mental health professional, a assistant dean of students, our manager of student conduct, manager of sexualized violence. And it's put together by a case manager who is from our counseling services department. And so that team meets every Tuesday, and we talk about what to do next. So that could be risk and threat assessment, and using some of those tools from NABITA, or the National Association of Behavior Intervention and Risk Assessment. Or it could be just, how do we make sure that this person is getting streamlined, coordinated services? If we raise a name and everyone says, oh, I didn't know they were working with you already, it helps us make one point of contact, make it more accessible. And we had to do a lot of work to, maybe it's only my institution, but up to that point, we were quite siloed. And student privacy was the thing that we all said we couldn't cross. So we actually had to work and build policies and practices around how to do information sharing in a respectful way to the advantage of the students who are in front of us. And so we use a human-centered principle approach. This is not about getting people in trouble. It's about getting people help. We all come to that table understanding that that's sort of our motivation. It could be that the impact of the behavior was drastic. There may be more charges, there may be other sanctions in place, and we just have to work through that to develop ongoing care plans. The other piece that the behavior intervention team does, Rob, just before I pass on this, and I think is fairly unique because we've grown into this over now in our second year, is making sure that we attend to the impact of these on other people. So when a mental health crisis is experienced, we have our responders who are there, we have the caller, we have the person the subject. But we've learned that if we don't go back, the ripple effect to all the witnesses and paying attention, the other faculty members, if it happens in a classroom, other students, if we're not attending to doing that and building understanding and caring for those folks too, they're not like my team. They don't see it every day. And it can be upsetting, it can be unsettling, it can be quite scary to witness. And so we really focus on reassurance and building confidence. It's also helped our senior admin team know that there's a competent group of professionals on campus ready to attend to these things. And so actually folks don't get involved too early. We've slowed down the reaction responses, and there's a trusted process where people go through where we say, we've got it, and we will let you know when we need help or extra resources. Hope that answers your question.
No, that's a fantastic response, Jake. I really appreciate it, and I'll take a minute to share a little bit of information on what we do at my institution. We also have a behavioral intervention team, but we call it the SIT team, and it's our student support and intervention team. And really the intention of that team, and if anyone who is listening on this call, if you don't have what Jake and myself have described as an early intervention team, multidisciplinary team, you need to do this. I would say probably make it your priority, because the sooner you can intervene or intercede into someone who is on a pathway of crisis and ultimately potentially to even violence, the sooner you can connect with those people and get them into the various support services, the better you have. So that's something we also do at my college, Humber College. Is there anyone else that would like to share some information around this? Okay, not seeing any. I'll then move on to question number 4, and I'll direct this to Chief Roman. If a person is experiencing a mental health crisis in public, sorry, I'm getting a message on my screen, pardon me. If a person is experiencing a mental health crisis and public safety and security or police officers respond, are the officers provided information about the person to the extent it is known before they arrive on scene? And what are the benefits and challenges of providing this information?
Thank you, Rob. I'll say this is a nice segue from what we were just discussing in terms of those BIT teams. We too have a BIT team in place and a layered approach in terms of how we're able to respond. So we have that behavioral intervention team that has that focus on some what I would call sort of wraparound services, case management, if you will, and it is a multidisciplinary team. And as you said, Rob, I think this is just essential to how we are able to effectively respond to support our students around some of these mental health crises and challenges. That early intervention is key, but so is, to your question, sharing information. And I know that there are challenges and limitations around some of that information sharing, and that each campus has to sort of navigate those. But as we respond to these crises when they occur on our campus, of course, the more information we have going into those situations, the better we are able to intervene and provide, I think, the most effective resources to bring to bear, which leads to better outcomes for those that we're engaging with. So we do, through our own dispatch center, when these calls come in and we are tasked with responding, we certainly will provide our officers with as much information as we have available to us. Now, again, that will be informed hopefully by having been at the table previously and having had those conversations and that information then that we can share with officers responding. But sometimes it's a first time interaction. And so there's limits to what we're going to know going into those situations. We're fortunate on our campus that we, within recent years, have been able to create a co-responder type of model, a collaborative approach with our mental health services staff. Currently, we do have limited hours where we're able to provide that partnered response. And we're hoping, of course, to build out on that approach, because we have found that it has been very beneficial when we have these crises arise on our campus involving students. We get the information ahead of time as much as we can. The officers will respond and then activate the partner response on site, on the scene from our mental health services crisis staff. And so in that way, we're really able to connect the students, immediately. We all know that when we don't have that opportunity, even though officers will, refer and provide what resources and information about resources to the students that they can, oftentimes if the student is sort of left on their own, they may not follow through with that connection. So it's very helpful on our end when we're able to respond and bring those mental health professionals right to the student as soon as possible. That's our ultimate goal, is to connect those students with those resources, particularly if this is the first time that they're struggling and we're getting involved. Now, of course, if it's an ongoing issue, hopefully those services and those connections have already been made. And the last thing I'll say is, in this layered approach, we have also, in addition to our BIT team, we have a threat intervention team. That is really geared to address issues that escalate, beyond that I think early intervention stage, where for whatever reason we might see a student, or in this case, our threat team also addresses staff and faculty, whereas our BIT team is just focused on students. Then we are able, with that team, to activate supports as well to address potential concerns that pose, safety or danger concerns for the individual themselves who's struggling, or perhaps to somebody else as a result. So I think, my takeaway from this is partnerships, collaboration, and layered approaches we have found to be really the most successful. And of course, the information piece there is imperative. How we share information, how we work within some of the restrictions and limitations around sharing some of this information are all key to the outcomes that we're seeking here.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that response. Maybe I'll ask Jake. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Jake, but that's why you're here. So just along the same lines, as you also are a practitioner and have boots on the ground, just to reiterate that question, if someone is experiencing a crisis on campus, when your people are going there, do they have information available to them that either about the student or what's taking place?
So similar to Chief Roman's comment, what's available to us in our system, we certainly, our dispatchers will communicate. In recent years, We've been more attentive to the risk of dispatch priming, with some officers sort of already getting there assuming something is mental health when maybe it's not. There could be trauma responses, there could be other kinds of, there could be just behavioral responses that are not particularly a mental health crisis, because it all looks the same in many cases. And so what we try to do is to not over prime them with information. If we know the person, if there are certain cautions around weapons or cautions around, we of course would communicate those things to our folks to make sure that they're safe. But we actually ask them to go in thinking very wide and broadly. So really, we give our officers who are responding, their responsibility is to communicate out to the BIT team or to other folks, first to their supervisors, of course. What are you seeing on the scene? So we use the hands, head, heart model around first responding. So really be great observers of what you're capturing. What's the thought process of the person? Can you follow is it organized? Is it hard to follow? What are they saying? Physically, what's happening? Are they seem agitated? Which is actually when we've given our responding officers those parameters to say, don't try to diagnose, don't try to even determine whether it's a mental health thing. Find these 3 buckets and drop your observations into those buckets when you're writing it. It will make sense to other people when they read it because that's their goal. They're professionals. Your first view, you've experienced this up close. When they may not be in full psychosis, they may not be in crisis 24 hours later when a professional is dealing with them. So your observations on the scene are really helpful. So yes, we communicate, but we also put the expectation on our staff to really document well their observations in an organized way that will help us. What are you seeing in terms of their thought process? What are you seeing in terms of their the physical behaviors that we should be paying attention to? How's the emotional regulation? And then be safe, right? So you're going to, as a responder, adjust your response in a principled way to all of those things that you're seeing. This, we kind of fall into our very basic training, which is observe, report, keep lots of space, be safe, make sure you're safe, make sure your partner's safe, make sure everyone is as safe as possible, and document this really well because people rely on this information. I think that has helped us actually get better reports in our system so that when our dispatchers are going into the system to relay that information, it's actually relayed in a differently organized way. So if they're going to a person that they've had previous encounter with in a mental health crisis, they're actually able to describe very quickly some of the associated behaviors that we didn't have before we were using that way to organize our reports.
Excellent. Thank you, Jake. Okay, I'll move on to question number 5.
Before you do that, can I just add
sure.
one thing?
You absolutely can. I'm sorry, I
That's
blocked
okay.
my video screen there for a second. So please, by all means.
Thanks. This is particularly to the US listeners of the panel. One of the things that is often a problem on campuses is this issue of sharing information and people inappropriately applying FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, to information. And it's important for everybody to really understand that any university official with a need to know information can have a right to and access to that information. So staff sometime will not tell officers things that they know that could be really pertinent, important to the student and the situation. So it's really it's important that everybody understand FERPA, understand the provisions, and apply it appropriately, rather than keeping information that might be helpful away from people who can really help.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point. That's not just a US thing. I know in Canada we also have similar, we have very similar privacy language, and a lot of people misunderstand that it's the owners of the data is the college or the university, and so the appropriate people within those institutions should be able to have access to that data within reason. Obviously, if someone is under the care of a registered health professional and the data is confidential and there's those kinds of things, and absolutely. But, you know, there is a lot of information that can be shared and should be shared. And we find certainly at our institution, you know, with our student support and intervention team, that's where a lot of that information is shared sort of confidentially, you know, within that very sort of tight panel of multidisciplinary experts. So, you know, if something is appropriate to share with the frontline security staff, then it is. But other than that, it stays in sort of a case file at a high security level in our system, and only the administrators that need to know. But it is important that we share information. Thank you very much for chiming in for that. We'll move on to, and I'll direct this question back to Richard from the UK. What type of training do your public safety, security, and/or police officers receive around mental health?
Okay, so that training needs analysis is really based on the type of situations that we've come across, as it needs to be appropriate, proportionate, in the interests of the community that we are assisting. So I think I mentioned before that all those responders are mental health first aid trained. Colleagues spoke about physical first aiders. Yes, we've got those, but we also need to provide mental health first aiders. We also train our staff in suicide intervention skills. So these are courses that are accredited by Mental Health England, underpinned by World Health Organization training, signed off by the clinicians. Neither me or my team are clinicians. What we are is caregivers. And the way that the security atmosphere has changed around, especially within the UK, it's come away from what we may class as inherently just security based. There's so much welfare that's gone into that now, and the other aspects around the training is that it's not, you know, you do it once and that's it. So people need to be competent, they need to be current, so they need to have the refresh elements, and it's been written into those training packages that it's a mandatory function that must be passed. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. So that's what we've done here in the at my university, and it's the courses that have been taken up well within the UK. I personally have delivered this course to over 40 universities throughout the UK.
Well, fantastic. Chief Roman, I'll ask you the same question. What type of training do your police officers receive regarding mental health?
So, of course, we have the minimal sort of basic training that is received to certify officers in our state. So through the academy, they receive some initial training specific to mental health response. Then when they're with us, we have our officers also receive crisis intervention training, so CIT training. But in addition to that, in the United States, through the Police Executive Research Forum, there is training that has come into place within the last 5 years or so that focuses on de-escalation, but really has significant application in mental health crises. And so this is known as ICAT training as an acronym. But what folks need to know on that is that it really does focus on scenario-based training. And with the CIT training, there's also scenario-based training involved in that. But that has a little bit more of a partnership where mental health professionals are participating in that. Most recently, as I mentioned earlier, we've been partnering more closely with our own campus mental health crisis team, the mental health services through our university health services for students here on campus. And those crisis workers actually partner with us, come to some of our in-service trainings, in addition to these special trainings focusing on crisis response. They are participating in that as well to both get a firsthand understanding of what we do, but also to provide their perspectives and their expertise and have that be a part of the training that our officers are receiving in terms of how they respond to these crises.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, the training together, I think, is a very important aspect, because what you don't want to have happen is those two levels of professionals meeting for the first time at a crisis and trying to figure out, how to work together. And so doing that training together, that's excellent. All right, well, I'll move on to the next question unless someone else has a response, but I'll direct this question to Dr. Madiba. What are some programs that you have used or seen that have worked when it comes to addressing mental health in your community?
Thank you so much. Our services are built in such a way that there are individual services provided to individuals who need them, but then we then move into communal and social and group programs that we provide specifically to our students. Besides having the latitude to consult, and it is organized in such a way that you do a booking, but you don't have to wait. We do have counselors in the South African model, basically those who've trained up till the first level of postgraduate, who are practitioners and they're certified as counselors. They are able to offer the first level of attention to those who knock, say, on our student counseling services for individual attention, and only after that they are scheduled if there's a need for more consultation with others who are certified by our health council to provide the kind of services that are needed. We also do a lot of education and awareness type of programs. We use mental health themes throughout the year. Some of these themes are aligned with, say, the international calendar on a number of this, this day will be a day for this. And then we take advantage of those. Some of them are national, and some of them, these themes, we build them into an annual calendar. So on a monthly basis, we do offer education and awareness around the mental health themes that we would have prepared in advance. And then we attract a lot of partners when we do awareness. So it wouldn't just be university staff who are offering information. For example, you know that there is that big intersection between mental health and substance abuse. So we will pool our partners from outside the university to come and provide awareness. And then our students would interact and be aware of those programs that are outside the university, but that might be necessary to them. And once they are aware, when they need them, we still intervene and facilitate the necessary connection. So besides the mental health themes that we have over a year for every month, we also have a podcast series which is linked to these themes, and it is organized in such a way that the topics build on one another throughout, and we are able to attract presenters who are within our unit, but we also have many other partners who are able to beef up this podcast series. Our services are face-to-face, they're also online. We also offer virtual services. We also have a chatbot, which for now, it's about 2 years that we've been using it, specifically dedicated to to mental health. And an interesting feature was our students would use the chatbot even over holidays. Say it's Christmas, the university is shut down, you'd still see activity on the chatbot when students are going through whatever challenges, and they go into the chatbot to then seek some kind of whatever support that they need at that stage. We, earlier when we were talking, Richard, talking about training, we offer a lot of training or training programs to support mental health, and it is for staff members to know how to support students, but we also offer training to our student leaders. We have many, many positions for student leaders. And because all of that is organized within student affairs, we also use student leaders in various structures, and then we train them in the type of programs that can also support mental health. For example, on gender-based violence. Themes around that. We provide training because there is also a big intersection between gender-based violence and mental health. As much as we are saying there is an intersection with substance abuse and mental health. We do a lot of training in the programs around anti-discrimination. And for sure, for us as a country in South Africa, we have just emerged out of apartheid. So discrimination is still an issue, but in discrimination, not only in terms of race, but also in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of sexualities. So we provide a lot of training programs so that that intersection between discrimination and mental health also receives attention through education and awareness. We also offer, and this training would also go to our security services, because I said earlier, these training programs and awareness programs are also offered to staff. Actually, when we have a lot of partners, say around a theme, and we have an exhibition, both staff and students are free to attend so that they are aware of what services are available for their own comfort. I must also mention that we do a lot of training around a newly promulgated act in South Africa called, the acronym is POPI Act or POPIA, which is the Protection of Personal Information Act. It is newly promulgated, but we come a long way with it because there have been policies all over in institutions at a national level about how to protect personal information. And there is also a lot of intersection between how the protection of personal information intersects with how we offer our programs around mental health. And so there is a lot of programs around training that has to do with this act for our security officers, but for staff in general in the university, and also for our student leaders. So that even if you are a first responder or you are a peer support or supporter, you need to know how to manage and how to use information, and you need to know those boundaries within which you have to operate. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much for that very, very thorough and detailed response. We just have a couple of minutes left, and I just want to acknowledge that unfortunately, because of the problems we had with Zoom, all of the attendees are on by phone, and so we won't be able to take questions directly from the audience at this point. So I have a couple of final questions, and I'm going to direct this one to Dr. Pennington. And Dr. Pennington, how do you take care of your own personnel that may be struggling with their own mental health? And how do you take care of yourself?
I think the first thing you really have to do is to know your personnel. You have to know your people. And by that, I mean, know about them, know their nuances, know their facial expressions, know how they interact with others. Just as we're talking about, students don't always share information, staff won't either. And they oftentimes particularly won't share it with supervisors because they're afraid of what repercussions there might be. There's an expression that I love, which is that everyone's fighting an internal battle that you know nothing about. And so it's really important to know people, to know who they are, see what's different about them, and then be able to pick up on that. I think the other thing you really have to do is check in with people on a daily basis. Check in with your staff, particularly after one of these incidents occurs. It's not just the first responders who might be feeling something about it, but other personnel as well. You don't know what might have happened in somebody else's life, in their personal life, in their professional life, that this series of events might have triggered. So it's really important to pay attention. That's the most important thing to people. And then when you do find that somebody is in need, that somebody has a personal crisis or a mental health issue, as a staff, as supporters, as friends and colleagues, we need to be able to offer support and guidance. As supervisors, we need to provide the time that they need to get the help and support that they need. As university administrators, we need to know what support's available on campus for our personnel, and also what external resources are available to support and assist them. You know, as was said earlier, if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of those that we're hired to take care of. And so it's really important that our staff are healthy and that they have what they need. And with that, we need to have what we need. So it's important to know who you are, to know what helps for you. Is it that going out for a run is going to make you centered again after a problem? Is it going to be reading a book, having a nice meal, whatever it is that brings you back home, those are the important things that we need to remember, we need to do them on a daily basis, and we need not be afraid to tell somebody else when we need help and support. That, I think, is one of the most important things, to share information, to share your vulnerabilities, so that other people can share them with you.
Fantastic advice. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Pennington. And I would just like to thank all of the panelists for their time today. I'll just open it up as sort of one final thing. Is there anything that any of you would like to share with the rest of the panel and to our audience that are listening on the phone? If there's any final thoughts, now would be the time to get them in.
Can I share something about the behavioral teams that we talked about?
Certainly.
One of the things that after Virginia Tech, a lot of institutions started teams that really respond, really work to work on the issues before they become issues. And I know that a number of institutions have started adding other members to teams like financial aid, which is kind of an unusual one. But as we're seeing so much stress on students by financial issues, that an addition of a financial aid person has been really helpful to the intervention process.
Yeah, that's good advice. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share as a final thought?
Yes, I want to go. We should emphasize that this is really, it should be a multidisciplinary approach if we are serious about dealing with mental health. I'm in student affairs, but I know the value that my colleagues in what we call our security department add, the value that they add. And after all, if their relationship with student is that healthy, it improves the general mental health of our students, because they are also at our gates. They are like, you meet them first before you even meet your lecturer. But as Karen was saying, we've also known that bringing in our financial aid officers closer when we talk about mental health, it is also important, because finance is another serious cause of anxiety and all the other things that come along with mental health. So the whole university is supposed to be involved. And I think for us in student affairs, we are learning more and more and more to realize that we need to network across the university very, very tightly for us to be able to support our students, especially as far as mental health is concerned.
That's great. Thank you. And I see both Richard and Jacob have, or Jake, sorry, have some final thoughts. So I'll go to Richard first. Richard, you're up.
Thanks, Rob. It just one really for our staff really, if we are, whether we're in the US, Canada, South Africa, the UK, our staff are absolutely outstanding. And some of the benefits that I've seen over recent years is the active listening skills, especially dealing with people within crisis. And that is to be applauded. We've spoke about, review of situations and the welfare of our teams. I learned in my past life in the military, someone would say, we used to call it a hot wash up, then a cold wash up, where we got the team together immediately, and then again, maybe a couple of weeks after. We all have a responsibility to our teams, and it's to build an environment of trust and breaking down those stigmas, not just within our teams, but the wider university campuses. And I feel, not just within the UK, but colleagues I've spoken to internationally, is that we've made great positive steps in that way. So from me within the UK and a real mental health advocate, I just want to say thank you for everybody in the way that they drive this work forward.
Thank you very much, Richard. And Jake, I'm going to let you have the final word, and then we'll turn it over to Josh to wrap up.
Gosh, there's a lot of pressure on the final word, but what I would add, Rob, is this: we try to be really honest with our folks about the working conditions that they experience, and as colleagues will know, you're going from a break and enter to a laptop theft to a suicidal ideation, back to a bar fight, to the working conditions. There's always something different. And so what we've had to try and introduce for our folks is remember that these things have an impact. And so you may not see it, the pressure to clear a call and get to the next thing, or, oh, it's just part of the job, when we're actually dealing with humans in crisis. So really to give the proper weight to what you actually went to. You're allowed to be bothered by that. Please we do the follow-ups the next couple days after particularly difficult incidents, checking in with our folks, asking them different types of questions than just what happened. But we really do lean into checking in and asking them how they're feeling. How are you feeling now? What was that like for you? And giving permission to, in strange ways, to folks who don't normally answer this way, to say, I was really afraid, actually. I thought I knew what to do. It wasn't that it wasn't well trained. I just got scared. I froze, and I'm working in a condition where I think that everyone, we're working in a fishbowl, and everyone's got an opinion on how we do our job, and I'm really afraid to make a mistake. And well, we have to attend to those are the conditions that folks are working in, into very high stress situations, and really helping them to de-escalate themselves too. So I couldn't agree more with what my colleagues have just said about taking care of our team, really taking that human-centered approach and making sure they have enough time between calls before they're on to the next. So that is where we would rely on our supervisors to be triaging and listening to what's being dispatched, because when the tap is turned on, it doesn't turn off, and we all know what that's like. So anyway, thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much, Jake. I appreciate that. And thank you all to the panelists for your time today, this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you may be in the world. Really appreciate it. And for those listening on the call, thank you. I'm sorry that we had some trouble with Zoom, and we'll try to get that straightened out for the next session. And with that, I will turn things back over to Josh Bronson from IACLEA.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you, Rob, for hosting today. You did a great job. And thank you to all of our panelists for being with us today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us. And thank you to all of you for participating. I deeply, deeply apologize for the technical difficulties today. I know how frustrating that can be. But if you do have questions for our panelists that you weren't able to ask because of the technical difficulties, please reach out to me, email me at jbronson@iaclea.org, and I'll do my best to get some answers to your questions. I do hope that you have found this webinar informative and hope that you'll take part in our next webinar as part of the Global Campus Safety Series. That webinar will take place on February 16th at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Registration for that webinar will be posted shortly. The topic for February will focus on hate crimes and bias incidents. IACLEA also runs many other wonderful programs throughout the year, including our leadership institutes, the Executive Development Institute and the First Line Supervisor Institute. Those will be coming up in March this year. Additional information and registration information can be found at www.iaclea.org. Thank you again. I apologize again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Be safe, take care, stay well. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.